think the best skill that we can learn is how to read the Gospels. We come from a world in the 21st century in which we assume that biblical literalism, the notion that the Bible that is literal and inerrant, is just sort of an inherent part of belief in the Bible. It isn't. The concept of biblical literalism in the 2,000-year history of the New Testament is a little more than 100 years old. Let me just say that one more time. In the 2,000-year history in which the Gospels have existed, the idea that what you are reading in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is literal and inerrant is a little more than 100 years old. It was the result of a very interesting movement, a backlash to Christian liberalism and the scientific revolution at the end of the 19th century, end of the 20th century, excuse me. I'm sorry, end of the 19th century. What century are we in? Yeah, the end of the 19th century, by a group of American Protestants who began a movement that was launched by a series of tracts that were written called the Fundamentals, and that is where we get the term fundamentalism from. It's a very new phenomenon. That's not how Christians have historically read the Gospels. It's certainly not how the church fathers who collected the Gospels read them, and it's absolutely not how the Gospel writers themselves intended them to be read. And I go through great lengths in the book to explain, what I mean by that. I'll put it in the simplest way possible. The Gospels are absolutely replete with historical errors and with contradictions. The Gospel of Matthew says Jesus was born in 4 BC. The Gospel of Luke says Jesus was born in 6 AD. That's 10 years difference. Which one is right? Now, let me ask you a much more important question than which one is right. Do you think that the church fathers who in the 4th century decided to put both Matthew and Luke in the canonized New Testament didn't bother to read them first? They didn't notice that they have different dates for Jesus' birth? They didn't notice that the Gospel of John absolutely contradicts the entire timeline of Matthew, Mark, and Luke? They didn't notice that there are 2 completely different genealogies for Jesus in Matthew and Luke? Of course they did. They didn't care, because at no point did they ever think that what they were reading was literally true. They would not even know what you mean when you use the word history. The word history, as defined as a accumulation of empirically verifiable facts and events, is wholly a product of the modern world. That definition of history that everyone in this room shares is barely 300 years old. For the ancient mind, history had very little to do with facts. It had everything to do with truth, which we, as products of the scientific revolution, think are the same thing. We think that truth and fact mean the same thing. Indeed, science tells us that which is true is that which can be factually verified. But that's not what the ancient mind thought. They were not as interested in the facts of Jesus' life as they were in the truth revealed by Jesus' life. And so when they constructed these stories about Jesus, and I mean that quite literally, they constructed these stories, they would, if you asked them, did this really happen, they wouldn't even understand the question. What do you mean, did this really happen? You're missing the point. The point isn't, are these facts true? The point is, what does this story reveal about the nature of who Jesus is? It's an incredibly difficult thing for us to understand, but it is the key to understanding how to read the New Testament, how to read the Gospels, indeed, how to read all scriptures and sacred histories.